Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Bhakti Prabhupada Ki Jai Namaskar Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Param Siddhal Sri Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Krishna Gaur Bhakti Vrinda Ki Jai Sri Sri Radha Krishna Govindra Shama Kundara Vrindavan Ki Jai Navadam Ki Jai Ganga Jamuna Tulsi Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Ananda Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Samavet Bhakti Ki Jai Go Premanand all glories to the Sam of the devotees. All glories to the Sam of the devotees. All glories to the Sam of the devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Guranga. All glories to the Lord. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Namo Om Vishwadaya Krishna Murale Shrimane Bhaktivedanta Swami Nityanande Namaste Saraswati Devi Prachadane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Chadane Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Hum Shema Bhavam Canto 10, Chapter 49, Verse 22. Adharmo Pachitam Pittam Aranchyantelpa Medasa Sambhojani Apadeshaya Jalani Vajalokusaha. Adharma, by irreligious means. Upachitam, gathered. Vittam, wealth. Haranti, steal. Anye, other persons. Alpamedasa, of one who is unintelligent. Sambhojaniya, as requiring support. Apadeshai, by false designations. Jalani, water. Eva, as. Jalokasaha, of a resident of the water. Translation: the guise of dear dependents, strangers steal the sinfully acquired wealth of a foolish man, just as the offspring of a fish drink up the water that sustains a fish. But ordinary people feel they cannot live without their wealth, although their possession of it is circumstantial and temporary. Just as wealth gives life to an ordinary man, water gives life to a fish. One's dear dependents, however, steal one's wealth, just as a fish's offspring drink up the water sustaining the fish. In the words of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, this world is a weird abode. Text 23. A fool indulges in sin to maintain his life, wealth, and children and other relatives, for he thinks these things are mine. In the end, however, these very things all abandon him, leaving him frustrated. Purport in these verses, Akrura is giving rather frank advice to Dhritarashtra. Those who know the story of Mahabharata will realize how relevant and prophetic these instructions are, and how much Dhritarashtra suffered for not accepting them. Although one tenaciously clings to his property, in the end all is lost, and the blundering soul is swept away by the wheel of birth and death. Abandoned by his so-called dependence, ignorant of the actual goal of life, indifferent to his real duty, and having failed to fulfill his purposes, the foolish soul enters the blindness of hell, taking his sinful reactions with him. Purport, it is sadly ironic that materialistic persons who labor so assiduously to accumulate insurance, security, property, and family enter the darkness of hell, equipped with nothing but the painful reactions of their sins. On the other hand, those who cultivate Krishna consciousness, a spiritual life, while apparently neglecting to accumulate property, a large family, and so on, enter the next life enriched with many spiritual assets, and thus enjoy the deep pleasures of the soul. Therefore, O king, looking upon this world as a dream, a magician's illusion, or a flight of fancy, please control your mind with intelligence and become equipoised and peaceful, my lord. Dhritarashtra said, "O master of charity, I cannot be satiated while hearing your auspicious instructions. Indeed, I am like a mortal who has obtained the nectar of the gods." Purport, in the opinion of Srila Vishnu Chakravarti, Dhritarashtra was in fact proud and felt he already knew everything Akrura was speaking, but to maintain diplomatic gravity, he spoke as a saintly gentleman. Here we have the conclusion of Akrura's advice to Dhritarashtra when he was leaving to go back to Krishna. And he further, in the previous verses, he talked about the temporary nature of relationships, etc. And in these verses, he talks about the temporary nature of whatever you gain. So you may gain so much in terms of wealth and properties, assets, but first of all, other people may steal them or take them away, or you have to spend money on your family members, etc. So no matter how it goes, how the happens, the wealth disappears. You don't hold it. People start taking it, or you spend it on different things, being obliged to family members, relatives, friends, etc. So it goes away. Or in criminal cases, a thief will steal it, and they will disguise themselves as your friend, and then they will take your money and not give it back. This is quite common in the material world. Or in business as well, they may take your money and not pay back or whatever. That's the problem with the wealth. And of course, beyond that, everything is temporary because you have to leave it. When you die, then you have to leave all your wealth. Even if you still got wealth when you're dead and people haven't taken it away, still, you have to leave it. And you don't automatically get that when you're born in your next lifetime. It doesn't come back to you. Of course, if you're very intelligent and you do punyas, yes, you can get some position in your next lifetime. But if you're foolish, then definitely chances are you won't get that money. And then you have to work very hard to get your money in the next lifetime. So this is the problem with attachment to material things, etc. So there's two things: attachment to things, objects, etc., wealth, and attachment to relatives. And of course, Dhritarashtra had both problems. He was attached to his position as the king, and he was attached to his sons to put them in the position of power also. So both of those attachments are there. So what Akrura is saying is that both of these are very, very temporary. And no matter how much pleasure you try to get out of them, you cannot really get that pleasure because it ends with the opposite. You lose it. Then your pleasure is finished. So in other words, the enjoyment of the material world is not real enjoyment because it leads to suffering inevitably at the end. So this is the normal position for people in this world. So how do they accept this? Why would they accept such a proposition? Oh, you can get everything, but it's taken away from you. Just like people will study for 20 years in schools, in colleges, etc. Then they get a job, then they get some money, etc. So someone very intelligent may say, well, you're working all this time and studying all this time and getting all this money, but actually it's going to disappear. You're not going to have it after some time. So then you'll say, well, why should I do all that? Go through all that endeavor of studying, getting a job, taking all the money, buying a house when I have to lose it? It doesn't make sense from a rational point of view that you have to lose everything. So then why would anybody work at all? Everyone would just sit there and say, well, it's all useless to work. But yeah, we see everyone doing it every day. So why is this? Ignorance. They don't look at the long term. As the Yaksha, when he asked Yudhisthira, what is the most astonishing thing in the world? Then Yudhisthira said, the most astonishing thing is that everybody goes to Yama's abode, everybody dies. It's inevitable, everybody must die. But every person thinks, that's not going to happen to me. That's the astonishing thing. They see everybody else die. Their mother died, father died, grandfather died, everyone dies, everyone else dies. And of course, it's just a common fact. But somehow we think, even if we accept the fact, we don't accept it in terms of ourselves because we keep on working as if it's not going to happen to us. That we're going to die and we're going to lose everything. Then why would we work for all of that? But so this is the astonishing thing in the world. Why is it astonishing? Because it looks foolish, but yet people do it. Even intelligent people do this. Very intelligent people, so to speak. But they do this. So it's another type of ignorance. So we know that the Vedic literature describes that the whole origin of our material existence and the wheel of karma and rebirth forever in the material world is due to ignorance. But of course, people when they hear this, they don't think, "Well, I'm not ignorant. You know, I've got knowledge, I got high IQ, I got a degree, and so on, so I'm not ignorant." But this is a different type of ignorance. One, ignorance of Supreme Lord. Ignorance of the laws that the Lord sets up, and the law of karma, the law of birth and death. Ignorance that there is another purpose in life. So these are things which this type of ignorance is what keeps the living entity in the material world. And of course, the primary ignorance is that, of course, we don't accept that the Lord is the enjoyer, but we think, I am the enjoyer. So that is a very basic cornerstone of material existence. And therefore everybody strives to get that enjoyment. Animals do it, human beings do it, devatas do it. So it's pervasive in the material world, this type of ignorance. Dhritarashtra is also ignorant. Akura is pointing out, you're also attached to your wealth and your kingdom and being the king, and you're attached to your sons. But you're going to lose them all. So why you should be so attached? Do something else. But as we see here, Dhritarashtra really doesn't accept that advice at all. Now this is very basic spiritual knowledge, which we'll learn in the Bhagavad Gita, 2nd chapter. You're actually eternal, and you're not the body, you're the soul. So don't be moved or confused by the flow of happiness and distress, etc., hot and cold in this material world. It's all temporary. But nevertheless, most people continue in this way. They don't accept the instructions. Of course, Arjuna accepted, but here Dhritarashtra does not accept. Of course, Arjuna was servant of Krishna. He was a devotee of the Lord. He accepted the Lord. Dhritarashtra? No. They may accept Krishna as a relative, but they don't accept him as Supreme Lord, enforcing the laws of karma, etc. They don't think he has that power. The advice of Akura is that see this world as a dream, as an illusion. Not that it actually is illusory, but you see it as an illusion in the sense that it's all very temporary and meaningless. And control your mind, intelligence, etc. He doesn't even mention worship Krishna or worship the Supreme Lord. He just says, you're like Gana. See everything is illusory, and then control your mind and intelligence and be equipoised and peaceful. Sama, be shanta. So he doesn't even enforce theology. Say you have to believe in God or believe in Krishna. It doesn't say that at all. So he's just trying to get him to the level of jnana, as Krishna does to Arjuna in the second chapter, basically. It's not all bhakti. Mostly it's jnana and karma, not bhakti. So this is a strategy for people stuck in the material world. At least try to convince them of the temporary nature of everything here. And ultimately it's frustrating because we want something eternal. And then reject it. So that's step number one. So this is a common strategy. We see here, this is what Akura is doing. We see Krishna does that to Arjuna, first stage, not the body, it's all everything temporary. And we see this in the Upanishads as well. This is taken a little step further in the Upanishads because then the next step is not that everything's only temporary, but what is eternal is Brahman. So say, yes, there is something eternal. It doesn't tell you exactly what it is, that's all. There is some peaceful existence somewhere. We call that Brahman. So therefore you attain that state. Give up your ignorance, give up this dreamlike world, and you enter into that state of Brahman. So in other words, here Akura does not say, okay, become a Jnani and merge in Brahman, but it's a similar type of advice he's given. Reject the material world as illusory and then become peaceful, equipoised, etc. So the next stage is you enter in Brahman, merge in Brahman, etc. So it's quite similar to the Jnana teachings. So Acharyas explained that this is the reason why there is such a apparent prominence of Jnana in the Upanishads. Why so much Brahman, speaking about Brahman? Impersonal aspect. And the answer given by our acharyas is that this is one step towards something higher, one step higher. And then there's another step beyond that, another step beyond that. So it's not that this is the conclusion, but it is one step in the process. In other words, it's a preaching strategy. And then after this we go to another stage and another stage. So according to qualification, different people accept different things. So this is often stressed. It's stressed in the Bhagavatam, it's stressed in Bhagavad Gita. Don't go beyond your gunas. You're qualified for sattva, be in sattva. You're qualified for rajagun, be in rajagun. You're qualified for tama, you can stay in tamagun and do those activities. So according to your qualification, you do your activities. So the same applies for spiritual life. According to qualities, then you do your activities. And that is why Krishna explains extensively karma yoga for several chapters in Bhagavad Gita. Why? Because some people are not qualified for bhakti. They don't have faith and taste and acceptance of the Supreme Lord. Therefore, they have to do something else. What do they have faith in? What do they have a taste for? Material life. So for those people who have strong attachments to material life, give them karma yoga. Give them varnashram system. So this is what Krishna preaches to people that don't have that faith in the Supreme Lord. Then, by following that system, they rise to sattva gun, and in sattva gun, then they can appreciate they're not the body. Why? Because sattva gun is detached. One has a sense of peacefulness, sense control, etc. We see the qualities of the Brahma, Samadhamma, etc., Kshanti. And the quality of sattva is prakash, knowledge that we're atma, we're not body. So naturally, one becomes qualified for jnana in sattva gun. So therefore, after talking about first he goes to jnana, then he goes back to karma and says, Arjuna, you're not qualified for jnana, do karma. Then, later on, he speaks about jnana. And eventually you have to give up this illusion of the material world, etc. We know that everything is temporary here, including Svargaloka. So we have to give up. So then you do jnana and become very peaceful. So this is natural for people in sattva to take up the process of jnana yoga and strive for liberation. But, so this is what the Upanishads teach, in contrast to the Karma Kanda section. The Jnana Kanda section teaches, get out of the material world, all illusion. Karma Kanda section, stay in the material world and enjoy. do punyas and sacrifices and enjoy. But with regulation. Then eventually get purified. Then you do, next step, jnana. So, in jnana, there is utter condemnation of the process of karma yoga and all this, and karma kanda and sacrifices, etc. Inferior process. So, you have to go for liberation. So, great stress on liberation. Get out of this mess in the material world. As Akrura is pointing out here. 2, qualified people. People qualified with sattva. So this is one step. But it's also not the final step. It's only one step for people who are on a lower level. Then we preach something. Then we come to jnana level and sattva. We preach jnana. Give up everything is illusory. But next stage, what is higher? So less intelligent people will think, well, we've gone to the karma and now we got to the jnana. This must be the goal. But no, there's something higher than that also. So that is bhakti yoga. And not only we are Atma, but there's also a Supreme Lord. And if we worship Him and establish a relationship with Him, then we also get liberation. But we also get bliss. We get something more. So there's something more than jnana, something more than liberation. But you have to be qualified. Then you can accept it. So therefore, the Upanishads and other scriptures often glorify this idea of get free from the material world, get liberation, stop the wheel of karma, think of everything as illusory in this material world. Even in Bhagavatam. For people who are attached to the material world, that's the next stage, become detached. So then they'll emphasize things like this. So Dhritarashtra was very attached. So here Akrura is preaching to him to give up that attachment. So that's the next stage. But it's not the final stage. It's only one stage. After that, then we have to accept Supreme Lord and develop attachment for Him, the Supreme Lord. So that is a little bit of a jump because it doesn't automatically take place. As we see, if you do karma yoga, you become purified and you come to sattva, then you progress to jnana. So by jnana and getting liberation, you don't automatically progress to bhakti. It doesn't happen. Jnana does not produce bhakti. Sattva does not produce bhakti. So there's no automatic progression after jnana and yoga to bhakti. So and at the same time, bhakti is such that you don't have to be qualified by jnana to take to bhakti. And you could even start from tamagun, not sattvagun. So bhakti is a very special process. It's higher than jnana, but the qualification is quite different. It does not depend on gunas at all. Sattva, tama, rajas, whereas karma yoga, jnana yoga, stanga yoga would depend on your gunas for your qualification to practice. Bhakti does not depend on your gunas. It depends on being nirguna. So we'll say, well, that's very high qualification. Everybody here is in the material world, in the gunas, etc. How can we be nirguna? That nobody can do bhakti. But we see that in Bhagavad Gita, what does Krishna say? Everyone can do bhakti. Women, Vaishya Sudras, it's not only Brahmins can do bhakti after being a sattva, the Kshatriyas can do it, the Vaishyas can do it, the Sudras can do it, and of course Bhagavatam says even the Chandalas can do it, and the Mlechas and whoever else, the dog eaters, they can also do bhakti. So it is quite different from these other processes. Its qualification is not according to gunas at all, whereas the others are dependent on gunas. So what is the qualification for bhakti? And that is shraddha, faith in scriptures that teach about Supreme Lord, faith in the Supreme Lord, an attachment, a slight attachment to worshiping the Lord. That is the qualification. So though we are in the gunas, everyone is born into the material world, into gunas, still that faith may arise in spite of the gunas. And that faith is part of this nirguna process of bhakti. So that faith is the qualification for taking to process of bhakti. And all of this is beyond the gunas. So, but yet we are in the gunas, but yet the faith may arise in someone in tamagun, rajagun, sattvagun. So how can it, what is the cause of that faith? And the cause is mercy of devotees. This is the cause of that shraddha arising. So it may, the devotee may give mercy to a person in tamagun, or rajagun, or sattvagun, and then faith can arise. So it can arise within any guna. And then we start the process of bhakti. That process of bhakti is nirguna. It is not in the gunas. We may be in the gunas, but the process of bhakti is not in the gunas. And by doing that process, eventually we become nirguna. So that's the higher knowledge. Here Akura only approaches with the jnana type of knowledge here, so that he ends his preaching here with saying, okay, think of the material world as illusion, all of this attachment to your sons and your position and your wealth. It's all illusory, and when you can do that, give up that and thinking it's all an illusion, then you get real peace, happiness, whatever like that. So here peace is equated with happiness. This peaceful existence is equated with happiness. So this is preaching to a person who's not qualified for bhakti, but he's trying to get him qualified for jnana. And so therefore he stops here and doesn't go further at this point. But Dhritarashtra can't even accept this part, the jnana part. He's unwilling to give up his attachments to his family members and his position, etc. Which indicates that he is actually in quite a miserable, low position, because Akura is a great devotee of the Lord. And even the advice coming from him has no effect on him. And later we see Vidura gives him advice, and Vidura also a very great devotee of the Lord. He won't listen to him either. So they're giving mercy. Can't accept the mercy even. So very, very unfortunate. Yet other people are very fortunate. They may be in tamagun, but they get the mercy of the devotee. And then they begin practicing bhakti. So those are very fortunate people. It doesn't matter about their gunas or their varnas or ashram or whatever. Here we find Dhritarashtra, Kshatriya, royal family, etc. But can't accept bhakti at all. Can't accept jnana even. Can't get the mercy of a devotee. And the devotee's not even giving bhakti, he's giving jnana even. He can't even accept that. Normally we'd expect that the demons, they at least appreciate jnana. As we see, Hiranyakasipu teaches jnana, etc. But even that is beyond Dhritarashtra at this point. He can't accept this also. So very, very fallen person. Why? The attachment to his sons and attachment to the wealth is very, very strong. Too strong. So this is actually a disqualification for being a king. Of course, it's a disqualification for spiritual life and everything. But even from being a proper king, it is a disqualification. And therefore it is proper that someone else should be the king, like the Pandavas and Yudhisthira, because he and his sons are filled with this great, great, great attachment. So even Manu says that, a king who is attached to these vices like hunting or drinking or whatever, not qualified to be a king. Attracted to sinful life, not qualified to be a king. Is too attached to wealth, not qualified to be a king. So we see that the true kshatriya is a mixture of rajagun, so he can actually control people, and sattvagun. And the imitation king is one who has no sattva, or very little sattva, and more prominence of rajagun, tamagun. And that's a very dangerous king. Because he will use his power to exploit everybody, to get more money and to control others, and he will manipulate dharma for his own purposes. Whereas the person who has a balance of sattva will, one, appreciate the brahmanas and listen to them, listen to the higher people, good advice, etc. As Akrura is giving advice or a Vidura gives advice, he'll appreciate advice that comes from wise persons or from the brahmanas. And by that mixture of sattva, he will not be too attached to his kingdom, to his relatives, etc. He'll be quite detached because of sattva. That's the nature of sattva. He will have sense control. And will have an appreciation, I'm not the body, I'm the soul, etc. So when we see that a king doesn't have those appreciation for these teachings about Atma, whatever, means sattva is not there. It's more rajagun, which means great attachment to enjoyment in the material world. So this is the quality here of Akrura, of Dhritarashtra, unfortunate person. And cannot even appreciate jnana and can't get the mercy of Akrura because of his absorption in the lower gunas. Well, we can use objects in the material world for the service of Krishna, then they are spiritual. We can say some things are, in one sense, all objects have gunas to them, so we can use them and they become purified by that. They lose their qualities because they're related to the Lord. So that's called yukta vairagya, to constantly connect things with the Supreme Lord with no material attachments. Then they lose their material qualities completely and become spiritualized. So that also goes for our body and our senses. If we use them for Krishna, then they're spiritualized senses. And they don't give material results. So if we appreciate the deity by looking at them, then our eyes become spiritualized and they do not give karma. Whereas if we have material eyes, and we look at things, that gives karma. Huh? Every act of our different senses starts giving us different karma.
I want to say, here Akrura, he is not directly directly telling Dhritarashtra about devotional life or about Krishna, the Supreme Lord. He was indirectly giving some jnana. When you say devotees also do the same thing, immediately we don't speak about Krishna, the Supreme Lord sometimes. Sometimes we say you are not the body or Atma.
Yeah.
Yeah, we say like this, because if immediately we just see that Krishna is Supreme Lord, you have to accept, you have to follow, they might reject it. So is it like, like depends on the person's qualification, the preacher preach?
Well, yeah, definitely. We have to preach according to the person's qualification. And of course, the very extreme example of that is, what does the Madhyamadikari do? He distinguishes different types of people. So he distinguishes the demons and atheists. He avoids those people, doesn't preach to them at all. They're just going to offend. So he doesn't bother with them. Innocent people, people who are neutral, then he can present things to them. And if they're devotional and devotees, then of course he can present everything to them. And if they're great devotees, then he serves them. So the Madhyamadikari, he judges people, and accordingly, then he acts. Now, within those who are objects of preaching or whatever, the innocent people, then again, different degrees of people are there. So we can't present everything to them immediately, obviously, because they won't understand it. We start talking about Achincha Shakti or something, they don't know what that is. They talk about Bhagavan and Paramatma, they don't know those terminologies. Even you talk about Bhakti Yoga, Gyan Yoga, they don't know those terminologies. So you have to start very, very simply with everybody, actually. But some people, of course, are a little more advanced than others. Some people have faith, actually, so they can accept a Supreme Lord. Others are intermediary. They don't know if they believe in God or not. They're kind of agnostic. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't, I don't know. They're not particularly opposed to God, but at the same time, they may not accept a God. And then others may be quite attached to impersonalism already, like yogis, people doing yoga. People in Sattva Gun will be quite into impersonalism, even if they've never heard of, the Shankar's philosophy. They may appreciate Buddhism or something like that, quite common in the Western world. A lot of the yoga people, they appreciate Buddhism, all that. In fact, in all their studios, they usually have a Buddha face or something like that for some reason, even though, yoga is from India. They have Buddha there. So anyway, people are of different qualifications. So according to that, then we have to preach to them. We have to give them a little more than they're at and encourage them in this direction, but we can't give everything to them at once. So as I said, the scriptures advise certain processes according to qualification. So similarly, the devotee also has to use his intelligence to preach according to qualification, and he can only say certain things to certain people. In other words, people who are completely ignorant, all you can do is give them very, very general knowledge, which ultimately means you're not the body, there's the soul, not a body, etc. This is about as much as they can accept in the beginning. And then some people, they already accept that. Then you can go further and talk about God. But when you talk about God, then most people's concept of God is also a little bit strange, because they're influenced by Western concept of God, where he has no form, no quality, no activity. So it's almost an impersonal God. So then, and to say, okay, Krishna's blue, Krishna has a flute, that doesn't make any sense to them at all. They can't understand that. So one has to go gradually and preach to people in different ways according to their level of intelligence. Now, people of India, of course, a little different, because they know about Krishna, they've heard about Paramatma, Bhagavan, so we can preach a little quicker to such persons. But Western world, you cannot do that.
But in India, the problem is, this impersonalism, because people think that as we cannot see the Lord, so he doesn't have any form.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is the main problem in India.
Yeah, so we can say, no, you cannot see him because you don't have the eyes to see a spiritual form. Having no form means no material form, but spiritual form is there, but you need the eyes to see it. That's all.
Maharaj, when Srila Prabhupada started his school in New York, he directly used to give Bhagavad Gita classes. He went to drunkards and he went to hippies. So he never differentiated between impersonalists or anyone. But he used to give
Well, he
Bhagavad
had
Gita
to accept everybody.
but he was still able to
Everybody
make
knew zero also. They knew zero about Krishna. So he spoke very simply. A lot of it was you're not the body, you're the soul. Chant Hare Krishna, get free from, be happy. Chant Hare Krishna, be happy. That's all. Quite simple, but very, very true also.
About Janma Mrityu Jara Vyadhi. That's all.
Yeah,
You know,
and even later lectures are also quite prominently, not the body, birth, death, old age, disease. Yeah, quite, because a lot of the audiences were like that. It's very difficult for them even to get to that level.
You know what is Gita? When something is new, people take it out.
Yeah, well, that's that, and of course at that time they were kind of interested in something spiritual that they don't even know what spirit is. So they had some sort of alternative to material life. They wanted something, but they weren't quite sure what that was. So they had some interest because of that.
Well, the modern definition in the dictionary of faith is something feeling, and they say it's the function of the brain. But the spiritual version is a completely different circle.
Yeah, well,
But
actually,
this was-
yeah. The faith that we're talking about is an inclination of the Atma. If it only comes from the mind, then it's so superficial because the mind changes all the time. So when we say we have faith and a trust in the scriptures and an existence of the Supreme Lord, that must come from the Atma, inclination of the Atma.
Sometimes faith keeps changing. Like, people keep changing
Yeah,
the
that's
faith.
because it's on the mind. It's only in the mind. So it's in the Atma, and then it's developed over many lifetimes, so therefore it doesn't change.
I want to distinguish between what is a sense of duty
Well,
and what is material attachment. Because oftentimes, once we have children and we have a wife and some responsibilities,
Yeah.
they are mundane in nature. We have to bring them up, educate
Yeah.
them, get them
Yeah.
married, etc.
Yeah.
They may not show that much spiritual inclination also.
Yeah.
But still, we have certain material duties to perform.
Yeah.
So, where do we draw the line between attachment and a sense of duty?
attachment and?
Sense of duty to the family.
Well, this is all part of Dharma and Varnashram duties, etc. And it's all material, Artha, Dharma, Kama. Okay? All part of the material world. Now we try to reduce the Kama as much as possible, and therefore at least minimum Artha we give, support the family, etc. And we follow the principles of Dharma. We follow rules and regulations to do that. Of course, people who were not devotees, then of course the balance is a little more to Artha and Kama, and to the minimum of Dharma or whatever. If one is a devotee, then of course we minimize the Kama and the Artha, and we use the Dharma to regulate the Artha and the Kama as much as possible. And then we use our time and our energy for bhakti. So that's the basic emphasis for the devotee. He uses the dharma, the duties, etc., and supports his family members as much as is necessary in the material world. At the same time, he practices his devotional activities and doesn't give up his faith in the Supreme Lord. And he realizes that Artha, Dharma, Kama, Moksha are also relative things. They're not the absolute. Whereas someone in the material world may take them as absolutes. So he has to have a little detachment from these things, along with his, execution of those duties, etc.
Hare Krishna. I would like to know about Jnana Yoga. What exactly is it? Is it just studying the scriptures? Or is it, because sometimes we hear it's analytical study, this neti. So is it internal process of analyzing also what? Is it both, or is
Yeah.
it?
It's a term used to indicate the process in which you study the Upanishads in order to get liberation. Now, many of the Upanishads talk about Brahman and rejection of the material world, etc. And then the Vedanta Sutras are considered to be Vyasa's commentary to explain the meaning of the Upanishads. So the Gyanis spend a lot of time meditating on the phrases of Upanishads and Vedanta Sutra to disconnect themselves and become detached from their material bodies. And to support that, they have vairagya, detachment. So they also do austerities, fasting, whatever, living in solitary place. But the qualification is to be a Brahmana, because you can't study the scriptures, the Upanishads, without being a Brahmana, whatever. So you have to be very Brahminical and intellectual to follow the different arguments and scriptures, etc., like that. So it's basically an intellectual process supported by detachment and renunciation.
Maharaj, when Gopakumar reaches Jnanaloka, the rishis, the yogis in Jnanaloka, they told Gopakumar that you can't see the Lord with your these material eyes. So you have to just meditate, and then only you can progress further. But Gopakumar just decided, by his desire, he went with his the material body to the spiritual world. So how that Jnanaloka, the thoughts of Jnanaloka, living people, how they faith in the Supreme.
You mean on Tapaloka?
Yeah, Tapoloka.
Yeah. Well, yeah, on Tapaloka they were prominently, looks like yogis and others like that, who more were inclined towards the impersonal Brahman than anything else. Though they have no offense against the Lord or anything, but they were more dedicated to that. So therefore, they preach the idea of meditation and emphasize the mind more than anything. Gopakumar was not satisfied with that, because he was more interested in bhakti, in serving the Lord, chanting his mantras, and doing all of this. And we see later on, there's a whole discussion about the importance of mind, etc. And then the conclusion drawn by Sanatana Goswami is that, yes, mind also, the process of meditation is there, and it is quite important. And they were giving all sorts of arguments why jhana is better than anything else, because the mind is the primary sense, etc. But conclusion was that we don't reject the process of jhana, concentrating on Supreme Lord, but then we have the process of bhakti, and particularly the process of kirtan. So the conclusion is that the two mutually support each other. So we see that smarnam and kirtan go together, or jhana and kirtan go together, and we can concentrate on the Lord, and then the result of that is, when we concentrate on the Lord and realize the Lord, is we glorify the Lord. So we do kirtan, and when we do kirtan, this encourages us to concentrate the mind more on Krishna. Like this. So the two support each other ultimately, but then finally the conclusion is that kirtan is greater. Well, we are bhoktas by nature, jiva, because we're experiencers by nature. So, that experiencing and that enjoyment, so-called enjoyment, if it is independent of the Lord, then it becomes problematic and it leads to our position here in the material world. If it is that sense of experience is dependent and related to the Lord at all times, in other words, we serve the Lord, then we experience, or we have an enjoyment sense of happiness, ananda. So the idea of enjoying is not independent of the jiva, it's one of its basic natures, but it's how we get that enjoyment. So we get the ananda by pure love and affection and service to the Lord. That's all.